Welcome everyone to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I'm super excited to get in this conversation today with the energy master, as we determined. Miss Pilar, thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you for having me.
So, a question that I always ask everyone who comes on my podcast, not just because of the name, but I'm so fascinated with how each person really has this deep and profound connection with the divine feminine and expresses itself in such authentic ways. And I would love to hear, what is your connection with the divine feminine?
Well, I'll answer from right now. My current connection to that energy is really coming back to this primordial safety and belonging and okayness and nourishment that I didn't fully get the way I wanted to, the way I'm like, I should have gotten it that way. But my current relationship to the divine feminine is like going back to that place and recognizing that that's still available and that is such a huge part of almost like one of the deepest taproots of my healing is that place. That like the way I describe it to people is like what it must feel like to have breast milk, like, which none of us remember, but that feeling of like, I'm so held and I belong and I'm so nourished and I'm so safe.
Totally. I thought you were gonna say, and it reminds me of that feeling of, not that I have like a specific memory, but more of like an intuitive memory of being in the womb, of
Yes.
this like wholeness, but also like a void of trusting, because you don't know, it's the unknown. And the divine feminine has all those, characteristics to her. She can be fierce if she needs to, and wild. But I love that you were specifically connecting to the medicine of being nurturing right now and compassionate. Definitely what I've been going through as well is really finding that original mother. And like you said, we weren't necessarily given this in the way that we thought we should or had, and being that kind of mother to ourselves too, at least that's my experience with it right now too, is, oh my God, like the most divine connection that I've ever had with myself, like truly learning to love and to tune into that motherly energy on a level that I never had before is incredible.
Yeah, I have been going through my own version of that too, of like not even like trying to be my own mom, but sort of unwinding everything that is in the way of that like inner divine mother.
So beautiful. So what I was initially drawn to your work, I know that your journey has kind of succeeded over this, but we all kind of get into the spiritual world like one way or another. And I know human design was a part of that and is at least maybe a sector of that now. I kind of want to hear your story of, yeah, was human design the first thing? And then how did that really come about in sparking this kind of spiritual journey for you?
Human design was definitely not the first thing. It was another thing on the path, and I get asked this question all the time, and I even have a section about it on my website where I wrote, I'm often asked, how long have you been like this, or how long have you been on this journey? And when I really give it honest awareness, I don't and like it's always so difficult for me to say it because I feel like it sounds so pompous, but for my honest awareness, I remember this journey really starting for me before I really had cognitive memory. And that really initiated through the death of my mom when I was 2. That was a pivotal moment in this incarnation in regards to my psychic awareness and my awareness that there is more than eyes can see.
Yeah.
And though I, like all of us, had great pain and wounding and trauma and confusion, um, I really do owe it to my mom's death and our connection that opened up because of it. I owe my connection to spirit and the strength of it to that, because there was the beauty of the connection being there, but that connection also opened up this world that I was experiencing that definitely moved me at a really young age to seek out teachers and teachings and tools that helped me feel like what I was experiencing was normal and wasn't weird and alienating. So I was blessed, and also I would say like cursed in the same way, to get on a spiritual path really, really young. And I can pick out certain points of like, oh, when I was a teenager, there was this, and when I was in my 20s, there was this, but it really began with my mom crossing over.
Definitely. I mean, that's the journey, right? Like, I think that somehow there's so much new age spirituality that things get really skewed. But I hear all the time of like, I had my spiritual awakening in 2019, or things like this. And that can for sure be someone's experience. And maybe it is because we found human design, or maybe it was because I found Ayurveda. But truly, the initiation process was that trauma. And when you go back to that source of it, that really is the gateway that opens you up to spirituality, to understanding yourself and your true nature even more. As painful as those experiences are, they bring us the most deep and profound connection that we could ever imagine. And that's incredible that you were able to kind of pinpoint it back to when you were 2 years old. I guess I'm so curious initially to hear what were some of those psychic awarenesses that you started to realize even just at a young age.
So I I have I had and have a really direct telepathic connection with my mom. And one of the first things that was really strong when I was young is it was really easy for me to sense when I was around someone who had lost someone very important to them, because I would feel that person there with us. So I would often feel when there was another child or adult who had lost a parent or lost a partner. Um, I could, it was like there would be the physical humans hanging out, and then I would feel the ancestors kind of all sitting with us.
Right.
Another big one that I have had family members reflect to me, I would say, was I had a really deep awareness of choosing the incarnation and choosing my parents, and my dad and I choosing to have my mom, his wife, cross over. And many, many more, but those two I know were really strong because I've had stories told to me of things I would say when I was little,
Wow.
um, which I was told like you can't say that. But um, it's so funny too, because as I say this to you, I'm like, those are still two of my strongest gifts, like being I guess in a way a medium for ancestors, but really just being able to really connect with them easily, and then having a really clear awareness of the larger web at play.
Mm. The connection with the ancestors, I think, is the most important and often the most missed, I think, in spiritual healing. And, you know, I think this is just based on different dynamics in the family. And sometimes we're on this path where, especially if you're on the spiritual path, sometimes you could feel like the black sheep of the family. And so there feels like there's a disconnect from family, and that, oh, I don't see how I'm part of this family at all. And I want to go away from them. And truly, I find that a huge part of this path is making our way home and understanding that profound connection of how you made that choice to learn these lessons. And that's so incredible that you were already kind of at a young age able to make that realization, and kind of see like already trusting so much in the universe because you're accepting this huge and traumatic thing in your life as an opportunity for you to grow and define even a deeper connection. I'm curious, you know, because you mentioned maybe like some family members weren't really accepting of your intuitive gifts as a younger child. How did you build a relationship with your grief from such a young age? And at the same time, being able to stay in your intuitive gifts? Like, was there ever that period where you denied them, where you kind of blocked them out, or do you feel like you were able to kind of nurture them throughout your life?
So to answer the grief part first, um, I feel like because my be, because my, let's say, wounding started so young, my my relationship to grief was uh really cerebral. Like, I want to say almost like amniotic, which isn't the right word, but what I mean by that is I have seen pictures of myself after my mom passed, and I'm clearly grieving. You see it in my aura, you see it in my face. I'm a young child grieving. And my relationship to grief as I've gotten older has sort of been this journey of almost filling in the gaps conceptually of what my body already knew
Mm,
how to do.
mm,
So as I got older and became more aware of this happened and this is happening and all of these things are happening and they're very difficult, there was almost there's been this gap I had to bridge of like the awareness of what's happening and bringing that, braiding that with what my system figured out how to do quite young.
mm,
So I've had this amazing journey with grief as an adult where as I've so I just have an incarnation that's like a lot of death is around me. It's just part of my makeup is like I have a there's a lot of death in my life, both metaphorical and actual loss of people. So as I've gone through many deaths and loss of people as an adult, especially those I'm really close with, each the spirit of each person has played this huge part in bridging that gap
mm.
of like the ritual of grief that your body already knows how to do and bringing your whole system in congruence with that. So I I feel like maybe on the down low, I'm like a grief doula. Because I've had this wild journey with it. And then to answer your second question, there were so many points in my life where my intuitive gifts felt like the dimmer switch went right before off,
Mm,
where it was like they're so close to being gone. And when it would get to that point of like the dimmer switch is about to turn off, no matter what, there was some form of divine intervention, which I chalk up to my mom
mm,
stepping in. But my intuitive gifts were certainly not consistently nurtured. Um, and it, at a certain point, became apparent that if I didn't engage in some deep, committed healing and transformational work, that I wasn't going to get the access to them that I knew was possible.
Mm.
So it was like I had this really cool safety net where I don't feel like they ever fully turned off, but I certainly was called to action of like, if you want to use these, and if you want these to be something that feeds life, feeds yourself and life, you gotta put in some work.
Wow. I love that so much. I talk about grief quite often on this podcast. It's something that I've learned to create ritual around, that I learned from my teacher, who has also has a lifetime of grief and losses, and that's kind of been her story, and she's taught me so much from it. And I find it's just so, our culture has no idea how to process it, even though the body does. But like even like the rituals that we have around it, like I grew up like Catholic, Christian, and it's just so strange, right? Like all these things that we have around grief and the way that people deal with it or lack of. That just tells me like there's so much wisdom in you as a healer, and I can imagine like that's all it is a constant death and rebirth that we go on in our spiritual journey. So for you to experience that in such this like intense level, really takes you to like the depths of the shadows and being able to transform them into the light. And yeah, it just brings so much wisdom. So I just want to honor you there, I guess. And just say like, oh, I just see you so much. And yeah, that's really cool to see how you knew that the only way in order to deepen your intuitive gifts was through like transformation and being constantly on this journey and being pushed to do that. I'm curious because, you know, I love talking with spiritual entrepreneurs and seeing how their healing journey is just directly related to their spiritual business journey, and they're really one and the same. Um, since you're such a deep thinker, I have a feeling you probably pondered on this as well, and I kind of want to hear from you. Um, how do you find the connection between your spiritual business and your healing journey as one and the same?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you kind of just like answered the question for me. Like that they to me are um they to me on a level beyond sight are inexplicably interwoven.
Mhm.
We can separate them in our personal day-to-day experience and be like, now I'm doing my spiritual practice. Now I'm working on my business. But the way I see it, know it, and experience it is anything life presents me with that's mine to transform, even if I can't see it in that moment, has a massive correlation to my work. And an avoidance of that is an avoidance of my work.
Yes.
And I love watching something show up in mine or someone else's life. And, like our personality gets annoyed because we're like, I have work to do. But then how that thing always brings us, maybe it takes months, maybe it takes weeks, maybe it takes years, but that process always ultimately gives us access to more of ourself and more of life. And more of ourself means more of what we're here to bring through.
Mm.
So I think that if we're going to have, quote, spiritual businesses where we're essentially selling and offering ourselves and that which wants to come through us, then the first commitment has to be to whatever is ours to transform. Or we're in a constant stalemate with life.
Yes, completely. On so many levels. I've had the same thing where I'm like, I don't have time for this right now. Like, no, I can't deal with this emotion or this block that's coming up for me. Like, I've got X, Y, and Z to do on my to-do list. And it's just so funny. It's like, okay, the only way that you're going to get to what you want to do is by dealing with this thing right now and facing it. And like you said, those avoidant tendencies that we have, like using the to-do list is just a distraction just to be productive and just to let it feel good that you're like taking action and doing that. And there's so many different aspects to this. I like how you said, like coming back to your own healing journey. I find that like coming back to body and trusting your own body is such a good gateway for it. Um, what are some of the ways in which you bring authenticity to your business, like maybe like next step after, like, you know, doing your own healing work and knowing that that's really related to your spiritual business? Maybe I'll change this question and like, how do you make your business authentically visible? So like when I see marketing and sales in the Western world, it's like not trauma informed, right? It's just like in your face, like shoved. Um, and it can feel like when a lot of healers, I think, when they come into this space and they're wanting to bring their dharmic gifts to life, they find a resistance to it because they think, oh my God, that's what marketing and selling is. There's this disconnect between what I want to be sharing. So, how do you do it in a way that feels really authentic and then at the same time also bring success?
I love this question. I have a whole program on this that I'm like currently working on, so this is cool to be asked in this moment. Um, well, I have to start with what authenticity means to me, because I think that there's a lot of predominant ideas of what authenticity is, and most of them are not what authenticity is to me.
Mm,
So to do something authentically, to make it really simple, it it has a lot less to do with to put it more in like subtle language, it's not pushing my energy out, but it's also not collapsing my energy in on itself.
mm,
So what I'm looking for is, how does the frequency, let's take like creation and marketing and selling, how does the spirit of what I'm working with want to flow into form through me? And how do I how can I be of service to that spirit by making sure that things that aren't me are out of the way?
mm,
And what I find in business is that I do this work with people so consistently, the majority of the energies we try and run when it comes to marketing and selling aren't our energy.
mm,
So just starting to clear what we've been told, the ways we should, or and also the wounding and the jarring around seeing how it's being done and realizing that there's a lot of exploitation and sacrifice energy, et cetera, et cetera. Like we all have just vats of stuff that isn't ours when it comes to marketing and selling. So the more I can get what's not mine out of the way, the more I can come into congruence with myself, which is a really paradoxical feeling when it comes to creation and marketing, because in experience, it feels like a lot less of me is there and a lot more of creation gets to come through. And so, how that tends to look in practice is, if I have a creation come through and I'm working with it, and it's like, hey, talk about me this way in these places. And I'm like, wait, no, I don't want to be like, I don't want to do it like that, because I've seen people who I disagree with doing it. Like, then I know, like, okay, it's wanting to come through in this very specific way. I'm getting in the way of it. My preferences or my resistance is getting in the way of it. And how can I move that? How can I clear that and just let it come through how it wants to? And I always say that when you engage life this way, you have to be totally willing to be surprised
mm,
by how creation wants to create through you. Because you might be guided to use a certain marketing strategy. Like, let's like make a funnel. You might be guided to make a funnel. And you 6 months ago was like, I don't like funnels. I'll never use them. So I'm making this really abstract because a lot of what I've seen happen is that we have really sensitive, devoted, like really sensitive, devoted, sort of more ancient souls, let's say, who are so taken aback by the the comedy and the absurdity that is a lot of modern day marketing and selling. But in that I'm taken aback, there can be this sort of stagnancy of like, I have so much resistance to this that now I don't even know how to
Mhm.
participate in it in current time.
Totally.
And it's like should I do it this way to be right? And I need to be ethical and I want to make sure everyone knows I'm a good person. And it's like,
Sure.
it's, it's, there's just as much, in my opinion, there's just as much resistance in that as there is in the person who is totally like steamrolling their authenticity and integrity and capacity in the name of whatever thing they think they want. Like they're separate energies, but they're separate costumes, but underneath there's still just a lot of resistance. So
Totally.
what I'm looking at is less like, what's the right way to market and how should things be said and what's the right strategy, and more like, how does it want to come through you when you're more congruent with yourself?
Totally.
And one of the biggest lies is that when you do it that way, it won't work. That's actually when it works. Because to make it really simple, you're really excited about what you're creating. And that in and of itself is the magic.
Mm. Oh my
That
God.
was a long roundabout
Oh my
answer.
God, no. There were so many golden nuggets there. I'm going to try to remember all of the things that I wanted to comment on. One, we must have similar offerings because this is all what I am teaching my community too. So this conversation is going to be so fruitful for them. I work with a lot of women with this fear of being seen and wanting to be authentically visible for everything that you just mentioned because. And it really starts that dharmic seed of wanting to serve like from that authentic place, like you said. And it really just starts with the joy of like curiosity. Like, I love this thing so much. Like, it has helped heal me so much that I want to start sharing this with the world. And then the other piece of getting out of your own way and seeing resistances is so telling. Like, even when I first start talking to clients, before I even start to take them on, just even potential clients, like, I can hear those traumas or these blockages right away. Some don't want to, have any goals for themselves or set things like this. They're afraid of that, or of what that means for them. And, you know, they think that that is going against their intuition, for example. That's just like one specific one. And it really is just finding your own way with it. And that's why I found, I'm not sure how much you know about Ayurveda. It's the most ancient, okay, you good.
Yeah.
Most ancient healing science. And it's praises that each person has a unique mind, body, soul. So my whole work is basically getting everyone to understand how Ayurveda relates to their business. Basically, how can you find your authenticity aligning with your own energy type so that it comes out in the way that feels best for you. And like, we have things like the doshas which you can look at it, but it really is just so customized to that person's experience, and honoring that. And like you said, like, if it doesn't feel good, like, that's what's basically out of alignment. Like, that, it's as easy as that. And well, I guess I should differentiate between that, because I think there's also this misconception that when you're in alignment, everything flows with ease and grace, and people are coming to you, and there's no obstacles and challenges at all. When, for me, alignment is seeing these obstacles, accepting them, being grateful for them, because I know that they were specifically given to me so that I can transform them and then use them to turn them into my greatest gifts that I have. And but there's that certain, it still is that feeling of, I'm not pushing, I'm not fighting against something anymore, but I'm kind of just like allowing it. and accepting it and moving with simplicity.
Agreed. Yeah, I think alignment is like authenticity, and it's like we see it everywhere and everyone has a different relationship to it. And I think for me in this moment, it's very similar to what you said. Um, alignment, or I'll even say, like, I like to say body, nervous system, aura, coherence. So like all three
Yeah.
are like online and working together, comes from engaging with life and myself as they are, which is not always presenting it, which is not always comfortable or fun or showing me things I like to see.
Totally.
But it's in that direct engagement, like you said, that there's a flow that's accessed, that I think is that larger definition of alignment, is that flow. But it came through deeply engaging with where there wasn't flow.
Definitely. Yeah, like sometimes I even know right away if I'm really afraid of doing something, I'm like, oh, damn, this is it. This is the gateway. This is the portal of what I have to do because I have such a resistance to it that I know that's my greatest opportunity to change. Like talking about visibility, when I first started my business, I was like not showing my face on Instagram, didn't even know if I wanted to go on Instagram, and had such a resistance to it and what that meant and what it was going to be portrayed as. And it was really, I couldn't deny the messages anymore. And I was literally being pushed in that direction. And I had to build a whole new relationship with it in the way that I see social media, which I honestly, it's love hate for sure, but like kind of love, you know, like I've been able to connect with people from all over the world and like build this community. Like it's so crazy. It's wild. Like there's for sure downsides too. Like I can go on TikTok and go down rabbit holes, like, you know, for sure. But yeah, that I just want to give like a small example. I because I love your connection with your ancestors. I'm curious how you pull your ancestors into the work of building your business.
um so my board of directors is my fiance and my ancestors. They are very heavily involved in the business. And I'll make this more specific. So there's a lot of beautiful nuance with ancestor work and ancestral collaboration, because often the wisdom that they have comes from a time that we're no longer in. So there's an intentionality in the way that I work with them in my business. I'll give you an example. When I was first beginning, one of the the beginnings of my business was filled with huge initiations because I was so scared. I was just terrified of all of it, of being seen, of sharing, of the public nature of it all. It was just all so outside of my comfort zone. And there was a lot that had to be waxed out in those early stages to just get me to the point where I was comfortable having a website and writing articles. So one of those things was feeling this huge fear that was being kicked up around my ancestors, around if you go to do this, you're going to work yourself to the bone. Like you're not going to be able to do this without sacrificing things like being a mother and tending the home and enjoying the feminine, I guess you could say, because this was really getting kicked up on my by my matrilineal line and just my female ancestors. So one of the things I did in the beginning was I sat down and I would do some collaborative energy work, and I would show them, hey, here's what's available in 2018. I can do this. I'm not going to get in trouble, and I don't have to work myself to the bone. Are you on board with supporting?
Mm.
And, you know, some of them were like, yes. And some of them were like, I don't fully believe you. And some of them were like, I don't want anything to do with this witchcraft, you know? And so there's always this conversation I'm having with them where I'm aware that they have vaster energies they can bring in that are going to be really helpful. And I'm also aware that they have perspectives and their own forms of resistance to what I'm doing that are not going to be so helpful in my business and in the work I'm doing. So it's just like, I always give this example of, I'll tell people, imagine explaining to your grandma what, like, I'll tell them, try explaining to your grandma the program I have called Up Level, or like what I do. I'm like, what would you say to your grandma? And most people are like, and what that's pointing at is like, they have a certain consciousness bandwidth for how reality works, and we have a different one, and we're in a different time, though they are disembodied and have a much vaster awareness, but some of them are still operating from those perspectives. So I work with them to the degree that they are available to support in the business, and some of them just, like, I'll be honest, literally don't care about my business at all. Like, I have a whole group of ancestors who are like, get pregnant. That's all we care. Like, they're like, we don't care about entrepreneurship. We want you to procreate. And so it's like I love ancestor work because when you really, really get into it, it's a lot more like real and comedic than you might think. Like, they don't just all appear like holding candles, ready to like offer energy to your highest calling. Like, some of them are like, I don't care about this. And then some of them, like, my mom, for example, my mom, so this won't be surprising to you, the majority of my clients have lost a parent. So, and oftentimes it's recently that they've lost a parent. And my mom is so on board with those clients. Like, she is like right there with the parent. They're talking, they're dropping things down to us. And like, I can tell that she has a huge interest in that work. Whereas like my grandpas, my papas, they're like, I don't care about this.
Yeah, wow, that's so fascinating. It's so true. When you sign to work with clients, it's that, you know, material contract, but also that spiritual contract that you have with all the ancestors. Like, all the ancestors have to be on board. And I've never experienced this, but I know my mentor talks about experiencing this, where you have to set the clear intention to work with only well ancestors and to make sure that they're on board and their clients' ancestors are on board, because otherwise, when shit starts to hit the fan, let's say if they start working with you in a container and the ancestors are like pulling resistance, like, no, we, you know, we need you here, we want you to be in this direction. Like, it's just so clear that way. It's so important to get everybody on board and to have that communication. And it's so interesting because each ancestral lineage has their own I wouldn't say goals, but like things that they need to be completed for, you know, their own soul. So it makes sense that, you know, that focus is shifted from there. I'm curious how you're able to kind of differentiate between the two, because that's really hard, or, you know, not the two, but like knowing, okay, you know, I know that they want me to have a baby and they want me to be a mother, and that's really important for keeping our lineage alive in their own way. At the same time, like, I have this desire to build my business and to work with these different types of clients. Like, how does that come in for you, and how are you able to differentiate?
So how am I able to differentiate between like which energy I want to be working with?
Yes.
I'll be honest, I'm really bad at this. Like this is so my nodes in astrology are literally focused on this work and family.
Mm,
So I don't want to say I'm really bad at this. This is what I'm learning in this lifetime is and I'm only at the beginning of learning the balance, if there even is one, of work and family. And I'm very aware that my ego is going to take some major blows as I step into motherhood. And there's going to have to be sacrifice and less energy invested in the business, et cetera, et cetera. So to answer your question, um, I do my best to really engage with where life is moving me in these last couple of years. It's been very, very apparent that certain things are occurring in the business in service to me being able to become a mother. And I'm watching how life is sort of perfectly orchestrating
mm,
certain things, certain people, certain timelines, so that I feel a bit more comfortable to begin that journey. But it's so uncomfortable for me. Like becoming a mother is, there is so much there for me. Like I've always said for so long, the business is just the warm up. Like, and this is one of my gifts. Business is easy for me. Like I love it. It's easy. It's easy for me to do it in this really revolutionary way. It's that sure there's stuff that comes up along the way, but ultimately it is a huge gift of mine. And I always joke I've had many past lives as a high-powered businessman. um, Being a mom, tending the home and the family, that is super, that's a really uncomfortable idea to me. That is where some of my greatest work lives.
mm,
So I differentiate between the two by just being really aware that like I know what my great work is in this lifetime. And I also would say too that I don't necessarily, though in the day to day they're going to be seemingly separate, I know my future daughter created my membership. Like
mm,
I just I'm very connected to the children that want to come through, and I'm very connected to how they're already creating through me and their interest in what I'm doing
mm,
and how it's already a collaboration with them. So I can't even imagine what's going to happen when the first one is born to the business because I'm like, you're already the COO. Like,
right. Wow. That's so
yeah.
special. Before we kind of wrap things up, I want to hear more about this success in your business and how it comes really easy to you. Um, and I love that you said like you're an innovator of kind of creating your own ideal world of what your business looks like. And I guess this is like a really big question, but how did you do that? Like, what do you think is so innovative about the way that you've built your business that's different than others? And why do you think it's been so successful for you?
Oh, okay. So to the first part, um, I was simultaneously blessed and also credit to myself, like both, and to go through some really powerful initiations prior to ever stepping online or really birthing my business that really set me up to know that if I'm going to offer my work, I am going to do it in a very specific way. I am not sacrificing, exploiting, or overriding my energy, my capacity, my authenticity, what's in integrity to me. And that was just very, very clear that when it was becoming apparent that it was time to step out and offer my work, what was even more apparent was you're doing it this way.
Mm,
Like do you get based on everything you've experienced that it's this way or nothing? Like nothing else is going to work for you. So I was really, really resourced and set up to just step on the scene in this way that, you know, it's like, yeah, it's radical. And I'm also like, but it's also like, like, it's also what so much of us are devoted to. It's like to you and me, it's like, this is it, right? Like
There's
this,
no other choice.
yeah. It's like so many of us are devoted to this way. Um, and I think, and I don't think that, you know, it's like nice to hear that it's rare and special and whatnot, but I really think that my story, at least moving forward, is not going to be so unique. It's not going to be so unique to hear the story of someone decided to offer their work in this way where they were like, this will be life-giving or it will not happen. Like this will be an offering or it's not going to work. So I had that quote advantage, unquote. I also, though, in that came up against a world in many spaces that told me this isn't how it works here. So there was a very isolating period of kind of like moving in silence and continuing to trust and and maybe being like, I'm just gonna dip my toe in the way people, and then be like, nope, never mind, and like continuing to trust and continuing to trust. So I, in regards to the innovative piece, I was just, it's so obvious that my soul was like, if we're gonna offer our work, we're gonna do it in this very specific way, and there's no other option. So I was set up through life to really arrive there. In regards to business being easy for me, I just get it because and let me actually zoom out. It's not necessarily traditional business that's easy for me, though modern day marketing is what I studied in college and makes total sense to me. But it's that my gifts around energy make business easy for me. So it's less like, oh, I understand economics and more so I understand energy. So that makes it really easy to understand, quote, like spiritual business. And again, my business started at a point where I was coming out of a big period of hermitage where I had just been totally committed to those gifts and to living in a way that was life-giving. I don't know how else to put it. I had just been really, really committed to my path. So I say all this, and where I see that there's a lot of contrast, and because this is such a huge part of my work, I recognize that a lot of people come into offering their work and they are just like shrouded in the most beautiful innocence, and then they step online and they are just pummeled by all the shoulds and have tos and oughts, and they just get covered in energy that's not theirs. I also recognize there are people who step into this work and don't have a huge background or they don't have those years of commitment to healing and transformation. And then they're like, whoa, I think I need to do this to get this work to work. So I've gotten to meet and talk to so many people that I recognize the way I came in is quite unique. And I think it's what set me up for things to appear like they've been easy. And, you know, I use that word, that's a difficult word for me to use because, and I explain this to people all the time, business has been easy because the way I relate to life is with relentless devotion. So it makes business and the outer things that manifest run really smoothly. But I know the second I stop relating to life that way, business is going to be really hard.
For sure.
and confusing.
Right. Because you're disconnected from your body and your own journey. Like that is the compost for what's to come for your clients. And it constantly has to be evolving because you're not teaching what you taught 5 years ago. That's boring to you now. That's not relevant. You have to teach with what's actually going on with your body right now and what feels present for you. And I love how you, yeah, it's so interesting that you're like, I had an advantage. I went through this massive initiation process that probably brought me to my knees and was like the most challenging thing in my whole entire life. Like, yay me, I had an advantage. But you know, we all have those moments, and I think why we feel the suffering is the resistance to coming down to our knees. Like, just let it crumble. Like tower card moment, that is the biggest gift that you can. When I think about those moments in my life, and I'm like, oh my god, everything is crumbling. But then, you know, once you begin to really devote yourself to the path, you realize like, wow, thank you for trusting me with this. You thought I could face this, and I'm so excited to see what's going to be on the other side of this, because there's so much growth that happens. And like you said, it really comes down to just the devotion to the dharma of like, this is my life. This is why dharma is not just career. Like, this is my life. Like, I'm living, breathing this in every single aspect of my life. So to think of like, I would operate my business in a different way than how I'm living my whole entire life is like laughable. It's like, what would that even be, you know? Like, but it's so true, because when you're on your journey, you see your external world constantly validate all those little subconscious belief patterns that are still kind of like in the ethers. And they're like, see, I told you, you still have self-doubt here, or see, you still have lack of trust. When really, I feel like the external world is just getting you to strengthen that inner trust and that devotion that you have even more.
Yes, agreed.
Oh, I just love this conversation so, so much. It just feels so fulfilling and so good. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your time here. Um, how can our community further connect with you and get to work with all your amazingness?
The best places are Instagram and my email list. And everything we are doing and sharing is made very clear on both of those platforms. If people are interested in longer form writing, email list. If people just want little bits that are totally lacking nuance, Instagram.
I love it. I'll have both of those linked in the show notes. I certainly love following you on Instagram. It you can feel that connection that you have with your ancestors and channeling higher wisdom, and how it comes through you in such a beautiful way. And we vibe on so many levels. So I'm just so happy that we got it to connect. And that's what I find so fascinating too. Like, whatever modality you come into this world with, like, truly aligning on that soul level feels the most nourishing. So thank you so much for your time and being here, Pilar.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the show.